now move on to our second debate. Our second debate is provided by members from the JAG team across Joint Base McGuire-Dix-Lakehurst. Their debate question is, should commanders still hold the role of judge in sexual assault/harassment cases stateside? Major O'Donnell is for, and Major Glinesbarney is against. As a reminder, you can engage the audience during your debate. However, their time is your time. Please come forward. Do either of you have any questions?
Can I put this on my OP?
No questions. Okay. Major O'Donnell, you will have 2 minutes for introductions and opening statements. Your time starts now.
Hello, everyone. I'm Major O'Donnell. I'm a JAG. I'm actually a reservist who's a lawyer in my civilian career, which is going to come into part of this debate because I want to explain some things that are going to come up. The first thing I just want to touch on real briefly is the question: is should commanders get removed as judges? The question is actually not really the issue we're debating. Commanders don't serve as judges in courts martial. What it is with the proposed law, there's a number of laws in Congress that are proposing to remove commanders from basically the criminal justice system in the military. So to decide whether to refer a case to a court martial, a commander is the decision maker in that decision, and so the issue is, should the commander be removed from that position? The position I'm going to be arguing is no, that the role of the commander, basically as the commander's role is to lead a unit, and central to that leadership role is to make sure people follow his decisions, which he is held accountable for. Central to that role is the ability to discipline people who fail to follow orders and fail to uphold, in our case, Air Force values. My opponent is going to be arguing the opposite. So these are proposed laws in Congress right now. So at this point, I'm going to yield my next 20 seconds to my opponent.
Thank you. Major Glinesbarney, you will also have 2 minutes for introductions and opening statements. Your time starts now.
Good afternoon. My name is Major Meghan Glinesbarney. I'm the deputy in the 87th Legal Office. Sexual assault is a very serious issue that our services DoD-wide face today. And we've taken a lot of steps to correct that. We've developed a lot of training. We've added the SAPR program. We've added the Special Victims Council program. And removing commanders from the prosecution process for strictly sexual assault crimes is the next step in rectifying our problem and making us a safer service. Secretary Austin has explained that sexual assault and harassment remain persistent and corrosive problems across the total force. Our SecDef has supported this change, that we should remove commanders and move to a process in which there's a centralized legal office that addresses and prosecutes all sexual assaults across the services. And there's 3 main reasons that are really important that this will help our prosecution process and hold people accountable for their actions. The first one is consistency across the service, so the Air Force Department, as well across services, the Air Force, the Army, the Navy, Marine Corps, Space Force, everybody as a whole. Second, it's going to remove from the chain of command. There are a lot of benefits to that I'll get into in the body of my argument. But it's going to provide a lot of safety in the prosecution process for making sure the right decisions are being made. And finally, it's going to remove distractions from command. Instead of having to make these types of decisions, our commanders can focus on the mission, they can focus on their airmen, they can focus on the jobs that they need to be doing instead of putting so much time and energy into so much of our sexual assault process in terms of just the prosecution itself and those decisions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Major O'Donnell, you will now have 5 minutes to state your case. Your time starts now.
So, George Washington, the first general of the Continental Army of the United States Army, basically said discipline is the soul of any military force. It's the soul of an army. Right? And inherent in command, of any commander's inherent power and responsibility is the ability to discipline people that don't follow orders. We hold our commanders to a very high level of accountability. Commanders make any decision regarding who goes where, what they do, whether they're in harm's way. And we hold commanders accountable for those decisions very harshly. They're removed from command if they don't follow through, they don't do their job. Inherent in that responsibility we're placing on the commander has to be the authority to effectively deal with people who are not following orders, who are not complying with Air Force standards, with the Uniform Code of Military Justice. So we hold the commanders responsible, and as implicit in that responsibility is they have to be given the power to basically hold people accountable. Now, the proposal in Congress, there's a number of bills that are proposed. None of these have gotten passed. You can actually see them if you're actually interested in this issue. If you go to congress.gov or senate.gov and type in sexual assault or military law, you can actually see these proposed bills. Some of them pertain just to sex assault cases, and some of them pertain to removing any criminal charge that would be a felony out of the authority of a commander to convene a court-martial. It would be a separate entity. The problem with that is that we're just creating basically a civilian equivalent of a district attorney's office or a U.S. attorney's office to decide whether to prosecute cases. It creates a two-tier system where a commander has to give orders, but the decision about whether someone complies with orders, the decision whether to prosecute someone is made by an independent bureaucratic entity. So it's not for you, basically disempowering our commanders. Now, implicit in this change of law is a belief that our commanders, well, what are we basically saying? We're saying that we don't trust that our commanders are actually upholding the law and upholding our values. Now, the Air Force and the other services a number of years ago have had a lot of issues with investigating and prosecuting sexual assault cases. But they've done a tremendous effort since 2012 and 2013 when we created the Special Victims Council, we created the SARC program. We've come a tremendous way to creating a system where we're actually dealing with sexual assault. So I would challenge you to find cases in the Air Force where sexual assaults are not being prosecuted by commanders. I would say as any JAG would say, if anything, we're zealously prosecuting cases that if there was an independent prosecutor looking into them, those cases might not even be taken to a court-martial. But because of the authority given to commanders, those cases are being taken and prosecuted. To do otherwise is basically to say that we don't trust that our commanders are upholding the law. And if that's the case, what should we be doing? Instead of creating a separate entity, what we should be doing is, if we really think a commander is not upholding the UCMJ by prosecuting sexual assault, then he's not doing his job and he should be removed. That's really what should happen, not creating another entity. At this point, I'm going to yield the rest of my time to my opponent.
Major Glinesbarney, you will now have 5 minutes as well. Your time starts now.
How do you know you have two attorneys debating a topic? One starts with the Continental Congress, and the next starts with 1951. So, accurate. In 1951, 70 years ago, was when the Uniform Code of Military Justice came into law. Previous to that, we followed a different set of codes, but that was the moment that we started in the process that we basically know now. And the key word in that is uniform. The intent of the UCMJ was to make sure that whether you were an airman, a sailor, a soldier, a Marine, it didn't matter. You were following the same rules, you had the same limitations, the same consequences, everything was the same regardless of what service you were in. And that's what we're looking for today. We're looking for consistency. That it doesn't matter if somebody is accused of a crime at Altus, or at McGuire, or at Kirtland, you're going to have the same people reviewing cases and making decisions, making those evaluations. Now, as my opponent pointed out, currently there are several avenues that are being discussed to change the justice system, different bills that are out there, but I just want to focus on the one where the intent is to remove the commander from just the sex assault process. The purpose of those bills are they're going to develop an office that's going to have a set of prosecutors located somewhere together where they review all of the sex assault cases across the Air Force. And they'll have one for the Army and one for the Navy and the Marine Corps. So we'll also have the Space Force. Sorry, Space Force guys. But what that'll do is equivalently build up like a U.S. Attorney's Office. And that's going to provide a lot of really great benefits. One is that it is going to remove the commander. It's going to remove it from the chain of command, and it's going to remove the prosecutors from the chain of command. You're no longer going to have to consider things like personal relationships, issues on local bases. It's going to be somebody who is physically separated and can look at a case for what it is. Again, there's not going to be any of those personality conflicts associated with it. You're not going to have commanders worry about the prosecution process. What is this going to look like? You're going to have somebody who's making that decision from beginning to end, and they're going to understand that process because they're trained prosecutors. These are going to be people who have hundreds of courts under their belt, decades of experience, and they can make those decisions in an informed and educated way. We don't ask a loadmaster to fix an engine, right? In this case, we shouldn't be forcing commanders to make decisions in areas that they don't have the experience and the knowledge, that we have an area of our force that is designed to address. We have attorneys who are experienced in sex assault, and that's what they should be doing full-time, and they should be supporting our service full-time in that area. Additionally, it's going to allow the commander to be able to make mission-focused decisions. Our commanders aren't going to have to be accusers in these circumstances. They're going to be able to continue focusing on command, continue focusing on their mission, and do their job, as opposed to dealing with so many of the side effects of sex assault allegations. They can take care of our airmen, whether they are a victim in a case or whether they are the accused in a case. It's not going to matter. They're going to be able to take care of airmen and get the job done. In reality, it's unlikely to make a large amount of difference in the number of crimes we're seeing in practice when push comes to shove. I very much doubt that there's an airman sitting here today, or anywhere, and by today I mean big airman, anywhere in the Air Force, who's sitting somewhere and says, well, I would have sexually assaulted someone today, but my commander would be the one to make that decision as to whether I should be prosecuted, and therefore I'm not going to commit this crime. Versus, down the road 2 years from now, say these rules go into effect, I don't think there's going to be an airman who says, well, if it had been my commander making this decision, I probably wouldn't have done it, but now I'm going to go out and assault somebody. In the reality, we need a system that is going to hold people responsible and accountable for their actions. We think that as the Department of Defense, we are resistant to change. We are not. At some point, people are arguing about cavalry versus tanks. At some point in history, people were arguing about ground forces versus air forces. We exist as an Air Force because somebody stood up and said, hey, there needs to be change. We need a force dedicated to the air. We develop new weapon systems when we know that we need change. And we need to do the same thing here in the military justice system. We know we need change, we need to see a difference, and we need to change the way that we prosecute these cases. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Major O'Donnell, you will now have 2 minutes for rebuttal. Your time starts now.
Central to my opponent's argument is the belief that what commanders are doing now is not working. That's the central argument. that what they're doing now isn't working, and that by creating a detached bureaucracy, another level of government, another group of people sitting somewhere far away in offices, that's going to make everything better. What you're basically doing is you're taking the commander out of the decision process. You're taking the person who actually knows what goes on a base, knows what goes on in a unit, what's the best course of action to take, completely away from the decision-making process. So you're going to have people who don't know what's going on the base, don't know the people involved, don't know the issues at hand, far away, making a decision. Implicit in that argument is the belief that these detached bureaucrats are somehow going to do a better job. I mentioned that I'm a reservist, I'm an attorney in the civilian world most of the time, and I was a prosecutor and I've worked as a defense attorney. And I can tell you from my own experience, the notion that having a separate prosecutor's office, if you go to the civilian world, they don't do a better job than what gets done in the military. Defense attorneys don't do a better job than what gets done in the military. It's a fallacy by people in Congress who don't understand how the military works that will create this fantasy office that's somehow going to do a better job. And it's not the reality of the situation. I thought you were holding up.
Oh, you're 30 seconds.
I'll yield my time.
Thank you. Major Glinesbarney, you will now have 2 minutes for rebuttals. Your time starts now.
Major Odell seems to believe that this is a situation where we don't trust what the commanders are doing and we want to take away their ability to make decisions. But that's not the point. The point is to make sure that the best actions are being taken in our military justice system. It's not that commanders aren't doing the best job, it's that we have somebody who can evaluate these cases in a fair and unbiased manner and make sure that the right people are being held accountable. I had a boss who one time said, in prosecution, our job is to do the right thing at the right time for the right reason. And that's what we need to be doing here. We need to not be taking into account personal relationships and what's happening at a base. A crime is a crime is a crime. And it needs to be analyzed in a bit of a vacuum so that those personal relationships and those concerns about what's this going to do to my EPR, what's this going to do to my OPR are completely pulled from the system. And that we don't have to worry that somebody's not doing the right thing at the right time because they don't have the right reason at heart. This isn't a situation where commanders' hands are being completely tied. This is specific to sex assault cases. In all other cases, commanders will continue to have the authority to make all the decisions that they've always been able to make, whether it's court-martials through all the way down through an LOC. It's about doing the right thing for our sex assault cases and make sure that we are taking care of our airmen. Thank you. I can see the rest of my time.
All right. You both will now have 5 minutes for your open discussion. During this time, if you agree on something, please tell us and we will write it down. If you change your mind, let us know and we will cross it out.
We probably agree that we don't think any of these laws are actually going to pass Congress. So.
At the end of your 5 minutes, you may sign the document with everything you agree on, and if you refuse or you believe something does not belong in the document, please let us know. Your time starts now.
And I think we both agree in our positions that sexual assault is something that needs to be addressed seriously and with due process.
Well, obviously, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. These laws probably aren't going to pass. The laws we're debating are probably not actually going to get turned into laws. They're not going to get passed by Congress. They don't have the votes. So we're probably debating a moot issue at this point.
I think there are going to be changes, we just don't know what they look like at this point.
Yeah, there's going to be changes, but they're not going to be what we're debating. It's going to be slighter changes. So there's going to be, our belief is that we're just predicting what Congress is going to do, is that they don't have the votes to pass any of the existing bills, and that there are going to be changes to the military justice system, but they are not going to be what we are debating of removing a commander. It's going to be lesser changes.
I think there probably will be an increased involvement of some sort of senior prosecution in these discussions. We just don't know what that involvement would look like at this point.
Yes.
Anybody else have any thoughts on this?
Don't be shy.
We're willing to give you 3.5 minutes.
What is this going to do for OSI and military forces involvement as it starts to go outside of the military system?
OSI will get shut down and you will all be discharged. No,
Yeah.
really nothing. I mean, none of the proposed bills really deal with OSI. I mean, I would imagine there's going to be some kind of training, funding for more training for OSI or something like that. It's really an issue of the proposed bills really are just changing responsibilities, so they're disempowering the commander in decisions about whether to refer a case to court-martial and so forth, and then creating a separate prosecutor's office. It's really a JAG-related issue. I don't really think it would have an effect on OSI. I don't know if you...
And to be clear, it's not that it's moving it outside of the military system.
Right.
It would just be moving it to when we say a separate prosecutor's office, it would be moving it likely to Andrews Air Force Base, where we already have a large number of prosecutors sitting, and we would just effectively be plussing up that office and providing them with a different mission. But it doesn't, there's been talk in the past of removing, all prosecutions from the military justice system and the local civilians will take it on. That is not what is being even spoken of really at all right now. Somebody else with their hand up.
Yes, in which ways are commanders not currently properly equipped to treat the question of sexual assault, which is driving this?
They
Is it
are.
lack of training?
Yeah, they are. I mean, we would probably agree that they are. There's a perception in Congress that they aren't. Some of that is based on stuff that happened years ago where the Air Force dramatically changed how they, and the military, all the services dramatically changed how they deal with sexual assault. So some of that is a vestige of that before the changes were implemented with Special Victims Council and the SAPR program and so forth. I don't think at this point there's any evidence to support that we're not dealing with sexual assault aggressively in the air, certainly in the Air Force or the other services. But certainly in the Air Force, I don't think there's any evidence to support that. But I think they're operating on old knowledge and old beliefs.
Thank you.
I had one note. You both talked about accountability from different angles, but it sounded like you had an agreement that there needs to be a system in place that holds either commanders and offenders both accountable.
Commanders are held accountable in all
Right.
directions based on whether they maintain the, why can't I think of the term, loss of faith in their ability to command, right?
Right.
And that's not the right phrasing, and I acknowledge that. But so it's kind of separate in the sense that offenders need to be held accountable legally in some manner, versus all of us being responsible for us meeting the obligations and duties of our jobs.
Yes.
Do you think if there is a third party that governs the process, victims be more hesitant to come forward?
Time! Debaters, please remain where you are as we read off what you wrote down.
All right, I have that we agree that sexual assault needs to be addressed seriously and with due process.
We agree.
Great.
We agree that changes will/should happen, but not what is currently being discussed, or likely what currently is being discussed is not going to happen exactly as it is.
Not exactly as we discussed.
Right.
And then I also wrote that commanders are currently properly equipped to handle this subject.
Are currently.
Yeah, they're currently able to handle this subject.
Yeah, I think we would agree with that.
They have been for the last 70 years.
That's all I have written down, unless there's any last minute adds or takeoffs that they all have.
All right, debaters, if you agree with everything in the document, please step forward and sign. If you do not agree with every single line, remain where you are.